Well, hello and welcome everyone to supporting HDR students with career planning and industry engagement. And thank you very much for joining us today. I'm Imogen Smith. I'm a lecturer in graduate research in the Graduate Research Education and Development team. And I'm here today to introduce two of my colleagues, Karen Cavu and Susan Schlinker, who are going to be facilitating today's session. Susan is our HDR Partnerships Officer, where she currently manages industry engagement opportunities for HDRs. So her area of expertise really is experiential learning for HDR's personal and professional growth, and she's very passionate about enhancing employability for research students. And Karen has only recently joined the GRE+D. Her first ever workshop for supervisors, so I'm sure you'll be very gentle with her. She's worked in senior careers educator roles for the past 13 years at different universities and also has private practice experience as a career coach and certified leadership coach. And she's very, very passionate as well about getting HDRs into their dream job when they graduate. But also we all acknowledge that that's a process that should start right from the very beginning, and that's a little bit what we'll talk about today. So I'll just start the session with just a little bit of housekeeping. If you're here today and you stay with us through to the end, completing the workshop will satisfy your professional development requirements for accreditation for 2 years. But it's very, very important that we can record your attendance. So please put your email address or your staff number, preferably email address, into the chat. And you can send it to any of us privately if you prefer, that's fine. And we'll remind you a couple of times during the session. So just pop your email address in there. Another thing is we try and keep these sessions as interactive as possible. We really encourage you to throw questions out there at any time. Feel free to interrupt us. We invite you to leave your videos on because that can help everyone feel like they're part of a class while we're doing this on Zoom. And if you're an experienced supervisor in particular, please don't be shy. We recognise that your experience is an incredible learning resource for all of us here today. So we do invite you to come forward and share your experience, offer advice, and ask questions as well if you like. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Karen, who's going to get us started today. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and best of luck with this session.
Thank you, Imogen, for your warm welcome, and thank you everybody for giving us your time today for this peer learning experience. The first thing that we'd like to do is to acknowledge the traditional owners. So we'd like to, we'd like to acknowledge the Turrbal and Yuggera people as the First Nations owners of the lands where QUT now stands. We pay respect to the elders, the laws, the customs, and their creation spirits. We recognise that all these lands have always been places of learning and teaching, and QUT acknowledges the important role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QUT community. So this morning, this afternoon even, I've forgotten the time already, what we're here to achieve together today is, first of all, Susan's going to give us a better understanding of GRE's industry engagement opportunities. I'll be talking you through the GRED career education programs and resources, and altogether the purpose of this session is so that we get a better understanding of how to support the career development of all your fabulous HDR students. And the slides are out of order. So the plan for this session then, what we're actually going to cover is an introduction to the GRED support, the HDR industry engagement opportunities, then the HDR career support opportunities, the support skills overview. We're going to go through a scenario together and how GRED can help you and your students. So for those of you who need the introduction to GRE+D. This is more for my familiarisation, I think, than for yours, because I'm probably the newest to GRE+D of all of you. So our team curates education that empowers HDR students to advance, which is building research skills, so academic skills and writing, to lead their career, and that's where I spend most of my time, to develop leadership and professional skills that are needed to launch careers. And then Susan's expertise is particularly in the E for engage with industry, through internships, through networking and other entrepreneurial experiences. So, too many mouths. Thank you for your patience as I working with 3 screens at once. It's a little unusual for me, but I will get the hang of it. Thank you for your patience. So what GRE+D really concentrates on, our services include HDR career support, modules and workshops, industry engagement and internship opportunities, orientation, of course, writing support and workshops, professional development, and research development. So the way this diagram has come about, which is essentially our new logo now, we identified the top 20 HDR graduate skills that are important for a career within industry or academia. And by benchmarking Australian universities and global tech unis, employers, graduate HDRs, that determined those top 20. So hopefully they're all really, really relevant. So it's advance your research, lead your career, and engage with industry. So why are we talking about student support from their supervisors? Well, as you know, you are the first port of call for all of your student activities. So you're the first person that they're going to come to for a little bit of support. But less than 25% of graduate researchers are securing those academic positions. So the ECOLA report from 2016, it seems like a long time ago now, but it's increasingly relevant actually. They reviewed the research training system and combined with the CSIRO research in advancing Australia's knowledge economy, there were some key points that were listed in terms of helping universities to be aware that they needed to be realistic about career expectations for HDR students from the beginning, but also to guide them through that journey as they go. So whether they are intending to stay in academia or to spread their wings and go into industry or business, industry connections are really, really important, and career understanding and knowledge of the job market is super important also. And I'm going to take this patterning off the recording, I think, because it's frustrating. So in terms of industry roles, if we're not looking for an academic role, if we're looking for an industry role, why is that important? Well, with a decrease in academic positions, students need to consider roles in the industry, but HDR skills are actually increasingly in demand. But sometimes HDR students don't know how to search for the right roles or don't recognize their own skills in job opportunities. So it's about finding the best link between the two. So when we talk about industry, we don't mean manufacturing in its purest term. We mean it's a catch-all term that basically means any professional work outside of academia. So that's in government roles, the private sector, SMEs, small to medium enterprises, or not-for-profits. And I've done it again. I'll get the hang of this by the end of this presentation. So, to introduce us, how can GRE+D help you and your students? Well, no pressure, but according to this diagram, I'm the knowledge part. So I look after career education. So essentially, we're aiming to provide HDR students with the tools, the mindsets, and the resources that they need to navigate the new world of work. But that can't be done in isolation from industry. So together with Susan, who looks after industry experiences and industry engagement, Susan looks after providing a range of opportunities and the support for students to engage with them, to enhance employment and employability readiness. So she's a really crucial part of this workshop in terms of preparing supervisors to support your students. So I'd just like to introduce Susan now and ask her to come and provide her expertise.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for that lovely welcome, Karen, and I'm delighted to be here with you today. Thank you for choosing to spend your lunch hour speaking with Karen and I about how important the GRE+D offerings of career education and industry engagement are. As Karen mentioned, I'm the HDR Partnerships Officer, and I look after all things industry engagement for HDR students. And so I'd like to take you through today a few of what those offerings are. So the slide that we have on the screen currently is the range of the industry engagement program. So it includes elements in there such as HDR internships, design sprints, mentoring, networking events, immersion placements. And what I would like to do in this session is just to walk you through what each of those offerings are. And also to let you know that there's no one size fits all approach to industry engagement for HDR students. It really is great if the students are able to visit the GRE+D HDR skills assessment tool and to be able to assess where they are currently, and maybe have a look for some of the gaps that are in their skill set so that they can find industry engagement opportunities that will help to fill those gaps. One thing I also wanted to mention as well is in Karen's lovely introduction, I'd also dropped into the chat a link, which is from a recent COVID impact report that ANU have put together. The great thing about this report is that it actually outlines the effects of COVID on each discipline area in terms of job opportunities. And what we've really seen from that report is that while there seems to be an on par level with the amount of jobs that are available in academia for graduates to what was happening before COVID, the excess, as you can imagine, is really heavily focused on contract positions. And there's a table on the second page of that report that you can see how the discipline areas have been affected as well. So let's start with where your students can find information on HDR industry engagement. And if they search for Engage with Industry on HiQ, they will reach this page here. So Engage with Industry is a section down the bottom of the first column there. They can click on that and it will open into a page about HDR industry engagement. There's a menu on the left-hand side that goes through all the different types of engagement opportunities, internships, immersion placements, design sprints, etc. And talking about industry engagement is really important, irrespective of which avenue your students are hoping to move into after graduation. So industry engagement is important regardless of your student's intended career path. For graduates looking to step into academia, researchers in universities are now required to have the skills to engage with industry and to have this experience and connections. So there's a quote from the ACOLA report on the slide that Karen referred to recently. And yes, even though it's a report from 2016, it really was a definitive report for industry engagement, and nothing has surpassed it since. So the slide there is still, the quote there is still very much relevant. And also university to industry collaboration is really becoming a key policy focus from the Australian government, and also for universities to improve in this area. And that means that there are incentives for researchers to engage with industry, and also the professional expectation to do so. And just on that point there, I'd like to make mention that in the budget announced earlier the year in May, the RTP funding has changed, and now it's linked to PhD completions, where the student has undertaken an internship in the first 18 months of candidature. So we are well positioned within the GRE+D team to have an existing industry engagement space and to be able to accommodate internships so that we are able to access this funding. But there certainly is a real push from the university to have students undertake internships within that first 18-month period. And as you all know, of course, there's an increasing competitiveness of grants as well. So with more grants requiring industry partners and researchers being able to show that real world impact, having those industry connections is really valuable as a researcher in academia. So for graduates wanting to work in academia, they do need to be equipped with the skills and experience to undertake collaborative industry research that will both bring in external income to the university, but it will also set researchers up to increase their competitiveness with grant applications. So more than 50% of PhD graduates will have careers in industry. And this percentage does fluctuate a little bit, but I have to say it's more along the lines of 70% of PhD graduates will have careers in industry. And beyond the professional expectations of academics to engage with industry, this is the other main reason for your students to consider industry engagement. So less than 50% of PhD graduates will have careers in academia, and this also includes sessional staff. And approximately 3% of HDR graduates in some disciplines will get to the professorial level. So with the increasing focus on innovation and development in industry, advanced research skills are really needed in industry. And there are so many reports that talk about the needs of the future workforce and the skills shortage around transferable and research skills. And these are things that HDR students and graduates have in abundance and are really needed in industry. So undertaking industry engagement activities during your students' PhD or MPhil will really set them up for future career success, irrespective of whether they go on to gain employment in academia or industry after their graduation. So let's start having a chat about some of the HDR industry engagement offerings that we have available through the GRE+D team. And the first one I would love to draw your attention to is the HDR internships. Now, this can be a 2 to 6 month clearly defined research project that's separate to the student's thesis. There's a lot of flexibility in the duration, and it really depends on the industry partner's needs as to how long it would be. But I would say roughly a normal internship duration is 3 months in length. So it's conducted with and for industry on a project, as I mentioned, separate from their thesis research. And that project is developed between the industry partner, the academic mentor, and the student. So for every internship project that we have for HDR students, there is an academic mentor attached to that project. It doesn't necessarily have to be the student's principal supervisor. It can be another academic staff member who's relevant to the project. In the case of HDR internships, they are industry funded. So the industry partner provides funding to QUT, which is then paid as a fortnightly stipend to the students throughout that internship duration. And that's because we pause their candidature, which pauses a student's scholarship. And so we have a shell unit called IFN 004 that houses HDR internships, and the students are enrolled into that unit while they're undertaking an internship. And that's why the industry funding is used to pay those stipends to the student during the internship duration. And part of that funding also includes a $1,000 fee, which is then at the completion of the internship transferred to the academic mentor's research account in recognition of their contribution to the internship. So the HDR internships are a really great way to build industry networks and really enhances your students' resume. The industry experience is complementary to their research expertise. And one thing to definitely note is that internships are competitive. And the way that Karen and I prepare students for internships, it's as if they're applying for a job application. So it's really great experience for them as well. In terms of eligibility for PhD and for MPhil students, we require them to have completed 6 months full-time equivalent study and a successful completion of stage 2. Now, there's 2 options for students securing an internship. We have a number of internships that are developed myself between industry partners, and they're listed on the HiQ website for students to be able to apply for. We also work closely with APR Intern, the third-party provider of HDR internships that you might have heard of. And so I also advertise opportunities with APR Intern. However, there's another way that students can source an internship, and that's to self-source it themselves. And we certainly do have students who approach us. I just had one last week who requested a one-on-one consultation with me because he said, I found this company in Perth. It's really aligned with where I'm going in my career. I want an internship with them. What can I do to be able to secure an internship with them? So just good to know that the students don't have to wait for an internship to be advertised. They can certainly be doing the research and sourcing the opportunities themselves. And so just jumping off from that, what can a self-sourced internship look like? Again, the eligibility requirements are the same of 6 months full-time equivalent study and successful completion of stage 2, but it can look like a standalone project that the students have secured themselves or through a mentor or their supervisor or an industry contact, or it could be a project that the students have secured as part of a larger grant or research collaboration. And so we're open to both of those instances. And normally what I ask students to do if they are looking to self-source an internship is to first of all brainstorm their network. And that will include your network as academic supervisor. Obviously, they need to have a conversation with you, especially to see if you have capacity to be their academic mentor for the duration of the internship. And if not, I advise the students just to ask their supervisor for a recommendation of another academic staff member who's relevant to the project who could act as academic mentor for the internship. We really encourage the students to build their personal brand online by making sure that their LinkedIn profile is alive and well, and to build their network. And so we encourage them to attend networking events, conferences, looking into mentoring opportunities so that they can share and learn and connect and build their network. And also another way is for students to conduct informational interviews. So that's perhaps, if we go back to that example that I just gave you of the student who approached me and said, I've got a specific company that I want to undertake an internship with. I advised him that as a starting point to build that relationship with the industry partner, to suggest an informational interview, which is this student approaching the industry partner and saying, hey, I'm really interested in what your organization does. I'd love to know more about what you do, what an average day would look like across different areas of the organization, how you stepped into the role, how the company has built, and any problems or anything going on within the sector or the individual organization that maybe you're looking for some support with. So an informational interview is a really great way for the student to get some background information about the company that they're looking for. But it's also a great way for the student to introduce themselves to the company. If the students are cold emailing industry partners and saying, do you have any internships available? The answer is always going to be no. I say to students, it's like meeting someone on the street and thinking, oh, this could be a romantic interest. And then the person asks you to move in with them straight away. It's too much. So the students need an opportunity to get to know the industry partner and for the industry partner to get to know them. And from that informational interview, then they can really pitch what value that they could bring to that industry partner throughout the HDR internship. The next HDR industry engagement offering that we have is immersion placement. So as opposed to internships where the students are doing productive work, immersion placements are more of a shadowing opportunity. So the students could be shadowing a CEO or exploring roles in a startup company or shadowing their mentor or supervisor, reviewing an R&D department. There's lots of opportunities here. There are shorter placement between 1 and 30 days, and it's best if the placement isn't more than 5 consecutive days in that 30 days. Only because it gets a little bit distracting away from their candidature. So an arrangement such as 1 day a week for 10 weeks, that's lovely for the students to be able to undertake a placement in that way. The informational interview is included as part of that immersion placement process. And the eligibility is stage 2 for PhD students and 3 months of full-time equivalent study for MPhil students. The 3-minute thesis and the visualize your thesis competitions. Well, we just had the QUT Graduate Research Showcase, which is the QUT finals of both of these competitions. Now, it might sound strange that a competition is an industry engagement opportunity, but it really is. So the 3-minute thesis competition is for students to pitch their research and its impact in a 3-minute verbal presentation with only one supporting static slide. The reason why we think this is such a great industry engagement opportunity for HDR students is because it essentially gives them an elevator pitch of their research that they can then say to industry partners, to potential employers. And also it encourages them to do that in language that's accessible to a general audience, so not discipline specific. So it's really improving their research communication skills. The visualize your thesis competition, on the other hand, it's where the students are creating a 1-minute digital short that summarizes their research and the impact of their research. Now, this is a fantastic thing for students to have on their LinkedIn profile. Short and snappy, potential industry partners or potential employers can really get a sense of the students' research in a digital way. There's also exposure for the finalists through QUT's website and social media channels. And as I mentioned, it develops their research and communication and presentation skills as well. The Graduate Research Student Showcase, it's a public event. We do invite external industry partners who are both current and prospective. So we just had the showcase on the 15th of September, and we had close to 500 people register who were staff, HDR students, but also prospective industry partners as well. And HDR design sprints. So transdisciplinarity is an increasing focus of future research to work towards solutions for complex problems. So rather than the design sprint being about particular disciplines, the HDR design sprint, it's about coming together and working collectively on issues that don't have a solution in specific areas. So for example, these could be climate change, waste management, improving health outcomes across populations, etc. So in the sprint, HDR students, they work in teams that are connected on solving a particular problem. It's a real life problem that's delivered by an industry partner. Last year, the industry partner was the Office of the Queensland Chief Scientist, and they were looking at how do you increase scientific literacy in a population by tackling what an effective scientific engagement program would look like. The 2022 Design Sprint will be working with Thriving Queensland Kids Partnership. We're really excited to be working with them. And it also gives HDR students experience with design sprints, and they're increasingly used in industry and research to innovate and test ideas in a short turnaround time. And the eligibility for the design sprint is stage 2 for PhD and 3 months of full-time study for MPhil. And lastly, networking events. So GRE+D collates networking events from across the university and also externally. We have a feed on HiQ where all of those networking opportunities are listed. And there's also training available through GRE+D Career Development to help students who are looking to improve their networking skills. And as you know, students building their social capital and gaining exposure to the world around them is absolutely vital for researchers. So we really hope to encourage students to attend networking events. So just to wrap up, where can students find information? Well, the students start with the industry engagement page on HiQ. They also need to register online for our HDR industry engagement program. And that will then keep them up to date when we have internships available for application, and to also complete the skills assessment tool and plan, as I mentioned at the beginning, for their development and training. So just one last slide here. This is what the registration form looks like. It's really important that the students keep their details up to date. It will also trigger an email to you as their academic supervisor so that you know that they're interested in the HDR industry engagement program. Sometimes we have internships that come in really quickly and the industry partner needs a HDR intern really quickly. So not all of my internships are advertised to students. In that case, I then go through the students who they have registered for the industry engagement program to see if we have any good fits for the internships. That's why it's so crucial that they register for the program and to keep their details up to date. So that's an overview of the HDR Industry Engagement Program. Thank you so much again for being here. Feel free to drop any questions into the chat. We'll be having a Q&A at the end, but for now, I'm going to hand back to Karen. See you soon.
Actually, before you go, Susan, there was a question about intellectual property.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Internships.
Yes.
That would be helpful to
Great.
talk about now.
Okay, so Karen has just mentioned that there was a question on intellectual property that came through on the chat in regards to internships. So for HDR internships, the industry partner owns the IP in all instances. There can be opportunities for research commercialization afterwards, and there are instances where students may be able to license the IP from the industry partner, but generally it's the industry partner that owns the IP. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Karen now. Thank you.
I was about to say welcome back, but you didn't go anywhere, I did. Okay, so from a careers perspective, what conversations are we actually having? So the kinds of conversations that we have with students is about knowing their strengths, their values, and their interests that they take with them, regardless of where they're heading in their career. We talk about understanding and appreciating the broader job market and where the opportunities are, where in Australia, where globally, and what their fit is in terms of their industry or academic niche. We talk about industry opportunities, both from an internship perspective with Susan, but also from a work experience and observation perspective, but also from the perspective of where do you want to go once you have completed your research degree. We talk about building and maintaining your network, and that's often a really confronting thing for HDR students because they're so concentrating on their research that sometimes it's challenging for them to look up from the library texts and to engage with people on the ground who may be interested in the work that they're doing in terms of their research topic, but also interested in the skills that they're developing as they're researching. We also talk about where to look for jobs, how to look for jobs, and really critically, how to articulate their professional skills. We often refer to those as transferable skills, but it's not my favorite term. I actually feel that we have technical skills and core skills. Sometimes they're used, described as soft skills. There is nothing soft about these transferable skills because they are almost innate. They can be coached, they can be drawn out, but it's complex for students engaged in study to recognize just how many core skills that they've developed and what the terminology change is across different industries. So they may be aware that they have some skills, but they only use them from an academic or from a student perspective rather than a professional perspective. So helping them to translate the language of the skills that they know that they've accumulated and convert them into terminology that the industry sites are more familiar with is really critical in terms of our jobs. So the focus of those conversations, it doesn't really matter whether students have a clear idea of where they're heading or not. Very often students don't seek support until they have a clear idea. The difficulty is that means that if they don't have one, they haven't yet engaged. Now, HDR students can be quite similar to undergraduate students in that they tend to not even start thinking about this until they're close to the end of their final year. But unlike undergraduate students who are still likely to stumble across opportunities in networking or industry opportunities or with information about the job market as they enroll into units or they navigate the campus, HDR students don't have those incidental opportunities through unit enrolment. They need to actively seek this information, and we really need your support in moving this to the front, not just the back of their minds. With your encouragement, with their supervisor's encouragement, they can be encouraged to engage with this at multiple points during their journey so that they've got an idea of where they're heading before they get to the end, because there's so much work that needs to be done to engage with the right people, to research the right types of careers, that needs to be done as early as possible. So we'd really love your support in just promoting that opportunity. Start early. So in terms of our GRE+D map, this is the piece that I am looking after in the careers support to lead your career and professional support. It covers a range of different skill development, from project management to resilience, professional communication. And that doesn't mean that they are unprofessional in their communication beforehand, but communicating for a wide range of audiences, as Susan referred to earlier, being able through the 3-minute thesis competition and other things to learn how to pivot their communication of what their research topic is and what their research skills are becomes more and more important. We work with students on collaboration, particularly on career development, of course, and planning, time management, and also leadership. It's focused on a range of approaches to, again, help HDRs to develop the tools and the mindsets to be able to construct a fulfilling career plan. That career plan may change. There isn't a straight line of careers anymore, but the career space is dedicated to working with students to help provide the resources, information, advice, webinars, opportunities, and challenges for HDRs to stretch their mindset, grow their skills, engage with industry recruiters and independent mentors. One of the ways that we encourage HDR students to do this is through the HDR skills assessment tool. This is a tool that's absolutely brilliant in terms of evaluating where HDR students feel that their skill levels are currently at. So it talks about their skills that's relevant to both their course and their career, but it doesn't just assess where they're at the moment. It then directs them to identify their skills gaps that may need to be filled before they finish their study, and where they can build those skills and fill those gaps. And so that's a really important piece of what do I already have, what do I still need to develop, and where do I find the resources and connections and advice to help me do that. So it's an ideal way for HDRs to track their skill development progress and, importantly, record it. So at any given time, they're really quite self-aware of their suite of tools that they've got in their toolkit and the tools that are still being crafted. Again, we would love to encourage supervisors to encourage students to engage with this multiple times. This isn't a one-off, let's set and forget. Ideally, students would be engaging with this along their HDR journey. So at the beginning, at least once in the middle of their program, and then at the end as well, so that they can see their growth, they can be encouraged by the strides that they have already taken, but that they're constantly checking in with where are the gaps that I still need to work on, so that they can build it. That helps them make progress as they go. The beauty of this tool is that it's only available to HDR students. So unless you're an HDR student, you won't be able to see the beauty of the actual tool, but please, we would love it if you would encourage students to go there multiple times, 2 or 3 times during their HDR research program, so that they can assess their skills, evaluate them, benchmark them against their peers, and then develop them. So the kinds of workshops, I mentioned that we organised workshops. The types of workshops for this year have been, all of our workshops are done on video webinar, so students can engage with them anytime they need. We record them for students who aren't able to engage live, but we talk about articulating your skills, how to navigate an academic career, but also planning your career, networking for HDR success, careers beyond academia. So we very much take a dual track approach for any student. If they are considering academia, we always like to remind them that there are opportunities in professional environments that are possibly more likely to come to fruition sooner, so that students aren't locking out a lot of the opportunities that are available. These programs are offered all year round. They are specific to HDR and they're available in UniHub. Another resource that we're really proud of are our eGRE+D modules. There are many modules available for resilience, for professional communication, all of those kinds of skills, but there is one module particularly that is a core module for exploring your career potential. And that's a 5-week moderated unit that runs every semester, so twice a year. It's designed to equip HDRs with the tools that they need to navigate the new world of work. And because it's moderated, I go in every day to see what comments, what activities students are engaging with, and they can ask questions of each other and also the careers experts. So this draws on current career theory, as well as one of my favorites, which is the VIA Character Strength Survey, which I love to use in particular with HDR students who are struggling with maybe imposter syndrome, perfectionism, low self-esteem, or lack of clarity around their professional identity. It's a wonderful affirmation of their signature strengths that they can draw on in any context, be it professional or academic. And in news to hand, we are in the process of writing, at the beginning of the process, of writing the advanced module, which will be more targeted for late candidature students who need to consolidate those transferable core skills and practice articulating their professional identity. In other news, there are several different programs for mentoring at QUT. We have an internal program and the IMNIS program. So the IMNIS program is the Industry Mentoring Network in STEM, and those applications open again around April in 2022. So the career mentoring community at QUT, in official news, you may have seen the launch yesterday. It went live yesterday. It launched this month and it enables learners, alumni, staff, supervisors, and industry professionals to offer or receive career advice and to share their experiences. So the career mentoring community is online. It can be short-term rather than the long-term commitment, which complements the career mentoring program, which hopefully you're familiar with, that runs from March to October every year. The community is really ideal for mentors who are willing to provide advice to students online without having to commit to those 6 months of working together. It can be a one-off or just, I've got a job application that I'd like to send out. Can I ask for your advice as I go through? So it might just be for a couple of weeks. It's a great opportunity, and you as supervisors can involve yourself at both ends of that, both as a mentee and a mentor. So what conversations, now you know what we've been talking about, what conversations can you have with your students? Well, firstly, you can share your own career story and your LinkedIn profile. By sharing your profile, they can learn from which organisations and which experts or influencers that you follow that they can also get feedback from and learn more about the industry and their particular research niche. So there's no need for you to make edits to your story. That's really important. Share your authentic story, warts and all. Careers are not a linear process. So if you've had a few false starts, if you've had opportunities that haven't come to fruition, this is terrific for students to hear as well, because it happens to all of us and it really normalizes how long these things take and sometimes how many attempts are needed to get to where they're looking for. So don't feel under pressure to deliver a perfect career path journey, because there isn't any such thing. So helping your HDRs understand that it takes some time, it takes some experimentation, and it certainly takes some planning to find the right path that's right for them, and to remind them that no experience is ever wasted is absolutely valuable. To remind them of the free LinkedIn learning opportunities that all students and staff have the advantage of taking part in. It's free for QUT, that exist for building a really professional profile on that platform so that they can make themselves open to opportunities, to recruiters, to peers, and to other senior people who have trodden this complex path before them. Other things, conversations that you can have. Firstly, well, to encourage career and industry engagement every chance you get. The more students engage within that broader industry environment, whether as a student, as a researcher, or just an interested observer, the more they know about the world of work, the easier it will be for them to convert their skills and articulate them in a relevant way when the time comes. A third tip is to welcome academic and industry career exploration. So not just networking with industry, but doing informational interviews, as Susan's referenced, and to go and experience this is what it's like in an office, in a co-working space, in an entrepreneurial environment, so that they can experience that and understand where those jobs are actually being offered. Something else you can do is to help students to practice articulating their core skills and new skills that they're developing. You're going to be the safe space for so many of these students. They're used to sharing the good, the bad, and the ugly with their supervisors. So if you are helping them to practice getting used to how to explain the new skills that they're building is a really core element of the relationship that they have with you that you can leverage for their benefit. And finally, you can invite as early as possible, conversations about careers and career planning. So you don't have to know how they need to build a career plan, but if you're able to just put it front of mind for them on a regular basis, how are you going with building a career plan? What have you got in mind? What options have you thought about? Would be fabulous. They trust you. They know how to work with you. So it would be fabulous if we can work together to promote their best opportunities. All right, we've talked at you for a while. I'd like to take us to a breakout room. So I've put a scenario together. So I'll just read through it. Fahud is in the final stages of his PhD and he's come to you as the supervisor. Asking for teaching experience as he's about to graduate and wants to be an academic. You're aware he has only published one paper and may struggle to find a position within the next couple of years. We'd love for you to learn from each other, workshop this together, and think about some ways that you would chat with him about his career and what points you'd bring up. So we've allocated about 15 minutes to this breakout group. We're going to put you in groups of 3 or 4 so that you can have a chat about it. And the goal is to arrive at a number of approaches that you might be able to take in addressing this issue with food and what you believe are the most important things for him to consider. So we're going to keep the scenario for you when you go into your breakout group, so we can have you, Susan, hopefully has helped me copy and pasted the scenario into the chat. Thank you. So copy that, take it into your discussion groups, and we look forward to chatting with you in a few minutes to see what strategies you've come up with. Welcome back to some of you. We're just waiting for one of the breakout rooms to return. And you're all back. What did you think of that activity? Did you have a lot to say? I would love for you, anyone who would like to share, I would love for you to turn your video on, or at least unmute yourselves and contribute. So from room 1, is there anyone who would like to share what you discussed?
I'm not sure. I go like, oh, I'm not sure if I was in room 1 or whether I was in. Sorry.
Fire away, Jean. It's good to hear from you, whichever room that was.
No worries. Well, yeah, we just had a conversation around or a couple of things around, well, what kind of career does he want, and how different it could be depending upon the disciplines that you come from. So whereby if it is really research focused, then focusing on publishing further papers and getting his PhD is important, maybe heading towards a postdoc. In the other sense, in other discipline areas, if you wanted to do more teaching, there's more practical disciplines that sometimes actually doing a little bit of teaching alongside finishing off his PhD is also a way to go. It just depended upon what type of academic career he was actually interested in and what type of discipline area he was in as well.
What a beautiful summary to kick us off. Thank you so much for that. Does anyone have something to add to Jean's beautiful summary there?
I'll add from group 2. We're a bit shocked that it's this late in the day before we discover that he's wanting a career in academia. That discussion should have been had 3 to 6 years ago, depending on whether he's full-time or part-time. And had the discussion been had earlier, we would have supported him in building his CV, and that would definitely include showing a CV, pointing out opportunities. However, at this point in the candidature, some other advice will be necessary around securing remunerative work, and if he's still keen to go into academe, how to build a fairly lengthy pathway from that position of security, because it's not going to happen now. I think Tobias might have some more to add there from our group.
Yeah, no, I'm fully agreed. It's way too late, and alternatives are, you know, or I think one of the things that I also said is that even if they followed all the advice and going to publish 5 papers or 10 papers in the next year, there's no guarantee that they're going to end up in an academic job. And I think that's something which, even at the start of the PhD, applicants should be aware of, that there's no guarantee. And that there's really, so I'm from a computer science engineering background, and I said that there's lots and lots of very cool companies and startups where you can earn the big bucks and do very similar research to what you would do in an academic job. And that's something to be aware of as well. And that requires more or less the same skills as universities are after for lectureship positions. So, yeah.
So it sounds like you've had 2 quite different discussions in those groups. One group was saying, well, let's answer the inquiry that came up. The second group was saying, I have some challenges with that particular inquiry. Maybe I'll mutate it. What's interesting is that there's no right way of handling that. You can give them both types of advice. I guess from a career educator's perspective, there's probably 3 different approaches you can have, and some of them are more helpful than others. So the second group really highlighted the hindsight approach. So, you know, great conversation. What did Karen say? 4 to 6 years ago. Really brilliant conversation. I would have loved to have had that with you a long time ago. In hindsight, yes, it is really late to be having that discussion. So for you as supervisors, it is important for you to be aware of a hindsight approach so that you know that it's really unwise to leave it this late again. However, saying that is not particularly helpful for Fahud unless he's got access to a time machine or a TARDIS. Another approach is to use a current approach, and
but
that's
it's not really we weren't really attacking Fahud. I think we were.
No, not at all.
Us as its supervisors were
Yeah.
going on there, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a critique of the supervisor, not the student.
It is difficult, isn't it? When students come to you, one of the hardest things to hear as a student is, oh, I wish you'd come a year ago. It's like when, you remember when we used to be able to travel and go to different places, and locals in those communities would go, oh, you should have been here last week. The weather was so much better. It's kind of, well, it's accurate, it's certainly accurate. It's not overly helpful at the time. So yes, to be aware that as supervisor, it would be brilliant to have encouraged Fahud to have come to you with those conversations earlier. What I loved about both approaches though, in both of the 2 rooms, is you came up with a current approach, which was to say, well, what are the opportunities at the moment? There may still be opportunities to publish. There may still be opportunities to work on his teaching experience, but there may also, as Tobias talked about, be opportunities in a complementary industry that may invite his participation in a similar way, but just not with an academic hat on. So this current approach is really helpful. So as supervisors, to encourage a deep and a broad dive into the job market into graduate outcomes and their skill identification and transfer into a new opportunity, not to lose sight of their ultimate aim necessarily of being a fully published academic, but to note that that might be a longer pathway for some, or it might be a pathway that you never return to because of the opportunities in industry. Another approach is to use foresight approach, which is at any stage that a student is engaging, anytime they wanting to look at career planning is a good time. So it's a lifelong and life-wide activity that we engage in. So encouraging anyone to look 2 to 3 years ahead at all stages of their study and their early career can be really helpful. So some of the big themes, and I can sense this through your discussions. The first one is encouragement. So yes, it's late, but it's never too late for him to begin to plan for his career. So I think all of you picked up on that. What other themes would you like Fahud to be aware of? Was there anything else that came up in your discussions? What gaps might Fahud have?
So I'm not sure what you mean by gaps in terms of teaching versus research. Is that what you mean, gaps?
In terms of employability gaps, it could literally be any of those things. It might be that he has a gap because he hasn't published. It might be a gap because he's not as experienced with teaching, or his gap might be, I don't know where else my research topic or my research skills could be applied.
In business, we have seen people who actually might be in that situation. So to them, I think one way out is to do a postdoc after their PhD for 1 to 2 years, publish more papers, get some teaching experience. Also, they can do sessional lecturing while they're in that postdoc position, and that prepares them for their first academic career in terms of like a full-time academic with research and teaching, responsibilities.
There's a third track. You're absolutely right. There's a different way of looking at things. He could look for employment as an academic straight away, may struggle with that. He could look for other employment in a complementary industry, or he could look at some more study and use sessional teaching as a way to bridge that gap. Yeah, you're right. Any other suggestions that you might have come up with to help Fahud?
If Fahud already has a career before he came in to do his HDR degree, it's always possible to go back, well, not always possible, in my area it is possible to go back and then take on sessional teaching and get a feel for it and start to build a CV that way if someone genuinely wants to make that jump.
I can tell that our students are in such good hands with this supervisor group because you really have covered everything. It's about being proactive and thinking broadly with Fahud about his situation. And you're right, there may be lots of skills and lots of experience that he brings with him during his study. So it's never too late. I hope that was useful for you to engage with that. We will document some of those suggestions so that you'll have access to that after the program. Now, if I can get the mouse to work. I love this infographic because it's a really simple illustration of the professional identity construction process that HDR students grow through as they develop from student through to professional, and whether that's as a professional academic or an industry professional. They start with their core values and their core strengths that they take with them everywhere at the core of that identity, but then they add all of these skills and identities as they continue through their research careers. And that enables them to emerge from their study as confident, competent professionals or early career researchers who are able to engage in either academic or industry career pathways. It's a beautiful reminder for our HDR students that they are not one of these things. I'm not just a researcher or a data analyst. I bring all of these things with me to any potential new role, and it's gorgeous. So hopefully you've seen a slide similar to this before. This identifies the skills that the World Economic Forum predict will be the most in demand by 2025. This information was collated in their Future of Jobs report from 2020. If you can read the list, it should be an enormous encouragement to your HDRs, because so many of their skills are critical to research success. So the major challenge isn't trying to persuade them to acquire these skills separately, but just how to articulate them differently to mirror the professional content, whether it's academic or industry, in that context for prospective roles. So HDR students are really well placed for the changing world of work. It's just that they may not always realize that. One of the career theories that I love to share with HDR students is the chaos theory of career development, which was first constructed by Jim Bright and Robert Pryor in 2003 to better represent the non-linearity of modern careers. They wrote their latest version, which is a new perspective on working in the 21st century. That was printed in 2011. But 10 years on, it's become the COVID go-to of career development theory, because it places equal weight on knowing the job market, focusing on upskilling, but accepting change and embracing the uncertainty by seeking ways to create advantage out of unexpected circumstances. That's really timely. So it's a model that students and staff alike can relate to in these times of uncertainty, but know that there is a framework that can support them all the way along. Now that brings us to the end of our workshop content, but not our conversation. So first of all, we'd like to know, while we still have you here, how you found the session. If I can make the slide change. If you can click on the link in the Zoom chat now, it's a really quick survey. It's quick, it's anonymous, and it's there to help us make these sessions really worth your time going forward. So we'd really appreciate some feedback. But most importantly, that'll still be in the chat, so I don't mind skipping to the next slide. And the final slide is, what questions might you have that's come up as part of your discussions together, or Susan and my presentation today? How can we help?
So I have posted one question. So basically you're asking us to raise any questions now, right?
Absolutely.
I asked any question. So I posted one question in the chat box here. Sorry if you have already covered that, but it's about like students who do an internship. Do they get extra time to complete their other milestones?
Hello, I'll jump on and
Okay.
take that question. So it really depends on the student. Sometimes students are able to undertake the internship and they feel no need to apply for extensions to move their milestones. It really depends on the student, but it is certainly something that's available, that if they undertake the internship, they can just go through the normal application for extension through the GRC afterwards.
Okay, so there's a provision that they may get few extra weeks to do their confirmation seminar and submit their proposal. And then the first year that we do in business.
Sorry, I just had difficulty hearing that question. Could I ask you to repeat, please?
No, I'm saying that in business, we normally have a milestone, which is the confirmation of their PhD candidature. I'm not sure how it's different for other faculties, but our students are required to do a seminar at the end of first year, and then submit an extended proposal. So you're saying that there's a provision that they can have an extension for this
Yes.
important milestone.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Correct.
Any other questions, concerns, case studies?
I do actually have another one, but unless somebody else wants to go first, like I can ask that question, but if someone else wants to take this opportunity, I'm going to let them use this.
Suze, it looks like there's another couple of internship/candidature questions in the chat.
Hi, everyone. So I can see one of the questions is, can we encourage students to take a leave of absence to take on some industry internships? So the way that internships work is that the students are enrolled in IFN 004, which is a HDR internship shell unit. So the student pauses candidature, they're enrolled in that IFN 004, and then I can see one of the questions is, does their candidature resume after they've completed that internship? And yes, it does. So with taking on an internship, the QUT HDR internship program, it's really designed to help the students. We ask the industry partner for funding so that the students are provided with funding throughout the internship while their candidature is paused. As with any QUT unit, you can only enroll in it once. So once they have done that internship, they can't re-enroll in that unit to undertake other internships during candidature. However, there is also opportunity for students to not be enrolled in that HDR internship unit when they're under examination. So they could potentially undertake another internship when they're under examination right towards the end of their degree. And I can see one more question. Currently, there is no time booked in the 3-year PhD program for taking internships, and not clear what to do with PhD scholarship payments during the internships. Yep. So as I mentioned, we've taken that into consideration. When a student is undertaking an internship, we stop their candidature, we stop their scholarship. They are then enrolled in the IFN 004 HDR internship shell unit. The industry partner provides the student with funding, which QUT pays to the student as a fortnightly stipend to cover their living expenses while they're undertaking the internship. Then at the end of the internship, their candidature and their scholarship is resumed. So it's a really seamless process of going candidature, internship, and candidature resumed.
Are there any final comments or questions?
Just a very quick one, which is that, it's a great opportunity, but I think we need to look at from 2 ways. One is that they do an internship for their that aligns with their future career aspirations, or they do a candidature which is more sort of focused on their current project and technically links them with the industry. Which one would you generally prefer that they would go towards?
So the students doing internships, the internship project is separate to their thesis research, but it can certainly be in an industry which is aligned with their thesis research. So I guess ideally, we'd be looking at students to undertake an internship with an industry partner that has a potential for their future career. Although at the same time, the benefit of the internships is that all of the skills and experience that they gain from the internship is then applicable to other scenarios and future employment as well. So I think the main point that I would get across to the students is to obviously undertake an internship to have that experience and skills, which can then be applied to a number of different situations. But I recognize your point. And if it is possible for students to undertake a project, obviously, which is separate to their thesis research, but is aligned, is with a partner or in a sector that is aligned with their research, and that's probably the most ideal outcome.
Thank you.
Suze, did you have any comments? Sorry to keep calling you back. Suze, did you have any comments about the changes to RTP funding and any updates there at all? Because I noticed Karen's just put a comment in about the first 18 months being critical. What's the outlook for that?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier in my presentation, but happy to touch on it again, which is that in the federal budget announcement in May this year, the RTP funding has changed to incentivise PhD completions for students that have undertaken an internship in the first 18 months of their candidature. So what we have done is change the eligibility requirement for students to undertake an internship. It used to be post-confirmation, but now, as I mentioned, it's 6 months full-time equivalent study plus a successful completion of stage 2. But if they would prefer to wait until after confirmation, that's also fine. And we can certainly accommodate an internship within that first 18-month window after confirmation as well.
So that brings us to the end of our allocated time. If there are any further questions, we're happy to take emails or communicate with us on Teams if that's easier now that you know who you're speaking to. Both Susan and I are available. But we'd really like to thank you for the time that you've taken today, and we've really appreciated your feedback and discussions. Thank you very much.